is you go into something called the witness. You go into just, that's completely disconnected. There's no emotion. There's no judgment. It just listens. And then once you get into that, then you can make a decision. If you start judging what comes out, what information is coming to you from your subconscious, you lose all day long. You're no longer in the witness. The who of who changes everything is the witness. And that takes practice.
Let's talk about change. The truth is, nothing changes unless you change. And if you want to step into your full potential, you need to surround yourself with the right people. That is exactly why I have created the Impowered Life community. Within this community, I'm going to be teaching you the exact same mindset and energy practices that I have taught my clients that are paying me well over six figures, including CEO owners of billion-dollar organizations and professionals at the very top of their fields. You're going to get access to 2 live virtual calls every single month with me, where we're going to dive into mindset, energy practices, spiritual principles that are going to help you thrive in every area of your life. Can't make a call? No worries. We're going to provide you with a recording so that you can catch up anytime. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity for direct coaching from me and to learn from incredible guest speakers who are going to share their best practices and growth. Remember, you become the people that you spend the most time with. So why not spend time within a community that is going to elevate you and your life? For an introductory $499, you're going to get a full year of support and coaching alongside high performers who are committed to expanding their careers, their growth, their finances, and to elevate their overall quality of life. Just click the link in the show notes or log into rudyricksteins.com to lock in your spot and start your transformation today. Welcome to the Impowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston Ricksteins, and this is the Impowered Life. Welcome to the Impowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Ricksteins. I'm your host, and today we're joined by Charles Schwartz. He is a Wall Street Journal bestseller for the book Who Changes Everything. He is a top-ranked podcast. He has the show called the I Am Charles Schwartz Show, and he is also a leading entrepreneur, business coach, mentor, and he is somebody who rapidly helps scales people's businesses and their lives. And I'm excited to have him on the show. Welcome to the Empowered Life today, brother.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate being here. I'm really excited about this.
I'm super excited for the conversation. To give our audience a little more context, we've had a number of conversations. Now I was on your podcast recently. We had a conversation prior to that. And so I'm getting to know you a little bit better and who you are and how you show up. And we are so similarly yoked in so many areas.
Yes.
But in doing, some research on you, you retired at the age of 36 as a millionaire. You wrote a book in 9 days.
I did.
And you achieved bestseller status within 16 days of writing your book.
I did.
You then launched your podcast, now not necessarily in this order, but within 46 days, you reached a top podcast level.
Yes.
So it begs the question, Charles, what do you know that no one else knows?
So there's a couple of things to answer that. There's this running joke that Jesus didn't walk on water. He just knew where the rocks were. When it comes to marketing, when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to all this, you kind of have to know where the rocks are, but it's not enough. And it's the second part that I learned having worked at a hospice for 8 years, watching people die, that you could give me all the strategies in the world. You can give me all the tactics in the world. You can give me all the stuff, but I can't execute. We've all been there and we've read the books and we've gone to the seminars and we've hired the strategists and the coaches and then a week later, nothing happens. We have the new year coming and people are like, I have all these new great ideas, and then nothing executes. And I realized something was missing. And that's kind of how the book came to fruition and everything that came out of the book and all of my success, which we'll give the book away for free for you guys after we hit bestsellers. Check out Rudi's podcast. He'll have the notes. It's yours. It's completely free. Please enjoy it. But that's been the strategy that happened, that I realized that it wasn't there's kind of like 3 lies that we hold to that held us back. So
I want to go back for a moment and just touch on something, because, you mentioned, and we're at the beginning of the year, at the time of recording this podcast, and so many people are out there making these bold declarations of who they want to be or how they want to show up or what it is that they want to achieve in their lives. And you also then said so many people within a number of days they kind of find themselves stuck and they can't take the action of what it was that they wanted to do. Having you and I be in such similar spaces, I would love to find, from your experience, what do you believe is the single catalyst that really holds people back? Or is it really just those 3 points that you were referring to?
So I think there's those 3 points, but more so they haven't identified that the version of them that broke it can't fix it. They'll go through all these other different techniques. They'll go through ice baths. So they're getting this idea of this grind idea, or this what I call hustle porn. Just get up at 4 a.m, have an ice bath, work out 17 times, have 16 meetings, have another ice bath. And oh, by the way, it's now 5 o'clock. You need to do it again. It just doesn't work. There's the ideas of there's so much ego that goes involved, how people show up and how they involved in their environment. They ineffectively execute because they have no idea who they are on a really high level, and they don't understand the version that broke everything, that decided on December 31st, I'm going to lose weight and make all this money. That person has no idea how to get there. There's a lot of basic steps that go into it, but there's some lies we have to get through first.
So in your book, Who Changes Everything, which I'm so grateful that you're giving to the audience, and thank you so much for generously gifting that to everybody. I hope the audience grabs a copy. What I want to really find out, you talk about the 3 lies that we've been told, and that hold us back from achieving what it is that we most want. Would you care to expand on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's 3 lies. The first lie is the lie of how. I don't know how to do it, which is complete BS. If you have access to a phone, if you have access to Google, you know how to build a rocket ship. You know how to do anything. So that one's gone. The second one is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I love sushi on levels I can't possibly tell you. It's embarrassing how much I love sushi. But if you made me eat it nonstop every day for the next 5 years, I'm probably going to try and kill you with wasabi because I just can't. You need that variety. Human beings need variety. It's why when you have people who play golf, they're like, okay, I love golf, but I need to go do this other thing. Michael Jordan loved playing basketball, but he wanted to play baseball, do these other things. And the last one is less positive, and I get a little trouble for this. I've actually gotten trouble on stage with this one, so I apologize to your audience in advance. It's the lie of why. This idea that if my why is strong enough, it'll drive me to it. I was on stage and there was an individual who was speaking about how why was so important. And you've been on stage before, you speak. And sometimes we forget, or the AV guy, the audio video guy forgets to kill our mic as we're walking off stage. And he got on stage and he goes, why is the most important thing in the world? If you don't know your why, you're never going to have success. And I cursed. I said, BS, with my mic hot. And it went across the entire thing. And I was like, oh no. And I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I apologize. He's like, no, come on. Let's talk about it. I was like, dude, I apologize. This is your thing. You're a bestseller with this. I apologize. I misspoke. I was being a jerk. And he goes, no, come on. Let's do this. So I was like, all right, everybody in the audience, raise your hand if you know why, clearly why you want to make a ton more money. Awesome. If you clearly know why you want to get in better shape, or you want to find the love of your life, or have better sex, or whatever it is, anybody not know their why? Cool. Now keep your hands raised if you've actually accomplished it. And all the hands went down. When I was working in hospice, there was a woman who was dying of lung cancer, and her daughter wanted to come and visit her. And for those of you who are in South Florida, this was in Boca. She was coming up 95. The daughter was coming up 95, and she wanted to have her final goodbye. And regrettably, because of traffic, the daughter didn't make it, and the mom died. So as we were leaving, one of the family members goes, well, if her why was strong enough, she would have held on for her daughter. And it hit me in that moment that I was like, either if that's what you believe, either you're ignorant to it or you're the most vile human being. Everyone knows their why. There's not a person I know that doesn't clearly know why they want to survive cancer, why they want to make more money, why they want to have a better relationship. Everyone knows it. But we are told that your why isn't strong enough, and that we guilt people and we judge people on that and we push them into that environment. And it just creates this environment where it never converts. It never works. And those are the 3 whys, or the 3 lies that we believe that you've got to let go of. Because if you can't let go of those, you're never going to progress.
So if you were to give somebody advice right now who is in the very beginning of the year, and let's say they are in a job that has been supporting them, and they have an aspiration to do something that is significantly bigger, but they've got to make that leap, and they know what their why is. They know what to do. They probably know how to do it because they've done the Google searches for years. What would be your advice to them right now?
So if you're going purely on a financial way, unless your wealth ratio exceeds probably a year or 2 plus whatever you're going to do for your business, Don't do it. And a wealth ratio is really simple. If your monthly expenses are $5 and you've got $10 in the bank, well, your wealth ratio is 2. You can survive 2 months. I grew up poor. I couldn't afford the last 3 letters of poor. We grew up very, very broke. And I've seen so many entrepreneurs who go in and they try and do this thing, but they don't have reserve money. They don't have the ability to survive what's going to happen and all the failures that come with entrepreneurship. It's a bit like trying to sing happy birthday, which please don't do it. You and I both could very poorly sing happy birthday, at least on my side. And you do it, no problem. But if I put a live grenade in your hand and I took the pin out and I said, okay, now sing happy birthday, you're not going to execute very well. You're not going to sing very well. It's not going to come out in a way that's going to convert. So until you can put that pin back in the grenade, which is, hey, I got to pay my bills. I got to make sure that my partner is taken care of. I got to make sure that I'm taken care of. I got to make sure that my kids are taken care of. I got to make sure that the company's taken care of. You're just not going to execute properly. So if you're going to do that, if you're like, hey, I want to do this, but I don't have my wealth ratio done well enough, that's a problem. The other thing is making sure you've got some practice. We talked about this a long time ago, and now every entrepreneur knows this. You're not really an entrepreneur until you lose your first million. We all joke about it when we get together. We're like, hey, what was the first million you lost? I was like, oh, it was this. And we all laugh about it. You're going to fail more times than you're going to succeed. And you're supposed to. The only way to succeed is to fail as fast as you can. Think of it like an infant. When a little infant starts crawling and walking, after 2 weeks, the parents go, you know what? The kid's just not going to walk. It is what it is. He can't do it. It's the last thing they do. They incentivize it. Like, hey, keep doing it. Keep trying. If you got a business that's solid, if you're working and that pays your bills and you haven't the experience, which is, I've tried this a bunch of times. I tried a side hustle. I tried to figure out what is this like? You know, it's like riding a bike before you take the training wheels off. Figure it out how to do that. And then having the wealth ratio or the capital to do it, you're going to want to do that before you execute at all.
So I know that one of the things that you are most known for, or let me phrase it slightly better, where I think your sweet spot is in supporting people to achieve what I refer to as the highest and greatest potential of, whether it's the individual and or their collective business. You do it through a process called persona shifting. Would you be able to apply persona shifting to the example that we're talking about now?
Absolutely. So persona shifting is everything in all of my life. And I'll kind of back into it the best I can. I was coaching someone and we were working on scaling his business because that's what he wanted. I was teaching him about decentralized command. I was teaching him the strategies. We were automating through the whole process and he wasn't getting it. And I was like, God, I must be doing something wrong. I was a Microsoft certified trainer. I was like, I have to be articulating this incorrectly. So I tried it again. And I tried it again. And I tried it again. And it wasn't working. So finally, regrettably, I was younger. I had a little bit of testosterone moment. I got mad at him and I persona shifted him without his permission. And all of a sudden he knew exactly what he needed to do and he executed and he had access to his truth. A persona shift is this. On the most high level, you have little ones, correct? Do you have children? Yeah. Do you remember when they were like 3 years old, 4 years old? If you took one of them and you bought them a bowl of cereal and you said, here, what is a 3-year-old probably going to do with a bowl of cereal? He's probably going to make a mess because that's just what kids do. If I went to that same 3-year-old and said, here's a broom and a mop, clean it up. It's just exactly. For those of you who are watching the video, Rudi just started laughing. He's like, it's not going to happen. But that's what we do in our lives. We go with the version of us that try and do it. To take it to a higher level, because I know your audience has tapped into this, there's a version of you that's not enough. Not tall enough, not short enough, not blonde enough, not brunette enough, not curvy enough, And as I was saying that, most of you guys changed where you're breathing in your body. You went to that area because that's what your body is required to do. In order to access a certain emotion, you got to change your breathing. There's also a version of you that's an unstoppable force. That's like, I am just a sexy bitch. I got this. I can crush it all. That is a different version. If you're making decisions from the not enough version, the version that got you there, the version that broke it, that 3-year-old that made the mess, and then asking that same broken version of you to get and make pivots, you can't. Because you go through this, and when you go through personas, there's 4 personas, and none of them have access to your truth. There's only another version, which is at the end of the book, which I will tell you guys a secret at the end. What actually has access to the truth, and you're going to make better decisions, and you're going to know what to do. There's not a person I've ever met on any level, from barely being able to pay their bills to the hard billionaires that I've coached, that don't know how to do what they want to do. They just don't have access to the version of them that can do it. And they do not have access to their truth. And they'll go through their entire lives not having access to the truth. And that's when the infidelity starts. They cheat on their wives. They cheat on their husband. They cheat on their kids. They get all this stuff and it doesn't fulfill them in any way, shape or form. There's so many of my clients that I've walked in. They're like, hey, I'm making 10 million. I want to make 100 million. I'm like, okay, what do you really want? Let's get it. And they have no idea because again, they're going to the 3-year-old that made the mess, asking him to clean it. So that's the kind of without getting into the nitty gritty of it, that's the basic. And I'll get into it if you want. I have no problem.
So what I would love for you to do is to take the process of what you're talking about and dummy it down. And for the benefit of somebody that's listening to this thinking, okay, persona shift, like I understand that we have different personalities and they fit different situations, but you are supporting people in being able to approach what they are obviously wanting to achieve or a hurdle they need to overcome, but they're doing it with their most empowered self versus their most disempowered self. So how would you be able to teach somebody to be able to do that, or at least recognize when they're in one of those states so that they can at least become consciously aware of the process?
Absolutely. So there's a couple things that are important. First off, it's called access. The word you're looking for, and the simple answer is access. How to access that version of you on command. Understanding that they're not archetypes, they're not states. You can take a version of you that's just really just intense and you've got this and this is the most successful version of you, and that person can still be depressed. You can be on the Tour de France crushing it, and then you get a cramp and you're like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. And that'll still come in. You'll still have that. So not states, not archetypes. You can have a warrior that's intense. When you go to archetypes, you have a warrior that's really intense, but it can also get depressed. So you can do both. So personas it's a little bit different. So in order to do it, you have to get access, and you have to start with something silly because that's how we learn. I think Sesame Street, I grew up on it. It's really amazing. For those who are playing at home, I can play this with Rudi, but for those of you who are playing at home, can you remember the last time, if you take your hand, if you're righty or lefty, whatever your predominant hand is, and you kind of go up and down your body, and you think about the last time you were really constipated? Most of you are like, what? Now I do that on purpose. It's called an energy snap. It gets your brain to click in differently. So when was the last time you were constipated? And you're like, oh, well, this, or when was the last time you had really bad cramps? And you're like, well, okay. Now where are you breathing? Are you breathing your chest, your stomach, your lower, wherever you're breathing doesn't matter. It's unique to each person. Then say, can you remember the last time you were on a roller coaster? And be like, yeah. I'm like, or the last time you had just mind blowing, amazing cuddle time with your partner. You're probably going to say, okay, now where are you breathing? Most likely a different spot. So cool. Now we can access those because your brain has to move its physiology in order to think differently and process differently. Just is what it is. Once we get that done, say, okay, we know how to do it on a low level. Now let's do it on a high level. Let's think about a problem you're having right now, and you go to it and say, cool. When was the last time you weren't feeling like you were enough? When was the last time you're like, God, I failed. I suck. I'm just horrible. Where are you breathing now? And just kind of put your hand on that spot. And like, okay, I'm breathing here. This is where I feel like when I'm not enough. Awesome. When was the last time that you felt like you were just unstoppable? And then you go into that spot. When you put your hand there, say, cool. Now ask that version, keeping your breath wherever that is. Ask that person, that version of you, the same question that you've been stuck on, and you'll get a different answer instantaneously. Once you do it basically, then you go into the idea of repetition. And once you do it enough, you can do it on command. There are clients that I've had who call me up and they're just in it. They're like, hey, I've got this negotiation. It's a huge thing. I'm completely failing. What's going on? I'm like, where are you breathing? And they're like, son of a, and they hang up on me because they immediately get access to it and they know what they need to do. So it all comes down to being able to persona shift or shift which version of you is showing up. The problem most people do is they judge. So there's 4 personas. There's the lowest, the warrior, the default, and the ideal. The first 3 have been made because your brain only cares about 3 things. Cares about, can I eat it? Can I make babies with it? I'm cleaning it up for your audience. And is it going to hurt me? Those are the 3 that it cares about. So it's based off, the first 3 are based off of fear. Imagine if you made one based off of love. It's a completely different ballgame. If you can do it off that, it shows up. But most people start judging the first 3, which is the wrong thing to do. There are times that I go into my lowest. So there's lowest, there's warrior, there's default, and there's ideal. I'll go into my lowest. I know how to invoke it on command because something's not working right. Maybe it's in my relationship or it's in my businesses or something isn't working right. And I know how to access it on command. And if I need to spend more time with it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to run to it. I'm going to sit with it because it's my warning light. It's going to tell me, hey, something's wrong. The other 3 can't have access to it. They can't tell you what's going on. This version of me that tells me I'm not enough and I'm not tall enough or short enough or whatever it is, I don't let it drive my car anymore. But it doesn't mean I marginalize it. I run to it. I'm like, hey, what am I missing, buddy? And we'll have a conversation with it without judgment because that's the who of who changes everything. It's not the personas. It's you go into something called the witness. And you go into just that's completely disconnected. There's no emotion. There's no judgment. It just listens. And then once you get into that, then you can make a decision. If you start judging what comes out, what information is coming to you from your subconscious, you lose all day long. You're no longer in the witness. The who of who changes everything is the witness. And that takes practice. We were talking about it the other day about meditation. being able to meditate in every moment is listening to what's going on. Having those conversations. It's not just about quieting the mind. It's being able to listen to every aspect of your life and hear what's going on without the judgment, because there's so much judgment we have.
What I love about what you just said was you intentionally go to your lowest, and I would love for you to give an example to the audience of a time recently where you've done that and why you would do that, because everybody else teaches you to avoid that, to run away from that, to never access that because, well, we want to be this, so we have to pretend that doesn't exist so we can override it. And you just said you willingly sit with it. You listen, you have a conversation, a dialogue, void of judgment. Why?
So it's where my answers come from. In that case, there's some times where I've gone to, for example, and to make it a little bit interesting, there are times where if I came into your house and I was going to punch your child in the face, you would not show up in your lowest. You would show up in your warrior because you're like, no, this is how I'm protecting the people I love. Mazel tov. If you took that same version of you, that warrior, and then tried to make love to your wife, that's going, not a good idea. Break some stuff. Not good. There's a time and a place for each one. I will invoke mine on purpose to gain clarity. And that's what my lowest does. Now, it's not always true, and it normally never has the answers. I did it recently. There was a business venture that I went on, and we're building out this entire thing, and I wasn't excited. I can't give too many details. So I wasn't excited where the management organization that I had built, because I build systems, I wasn't excited about what they were doing. And they weren't listening, and they weren't executing in a way that's efficient. And I was like, something's going on. And I didn't know how to fix it. And I went in and I did all these other things. I was, all right, I'm clearly missing something. So I will invoke my lowest, and I needed to sit with it more. And everyone gets access to their lowest in a different way. It could be a food. It could be clothes. It could be music, whatever it is. For me, it's ice cream. All day long, if I eat ice cream and I put sugar in my system, my lowest shows up. He loves it. So I will sit down. Please don't visualize this. I will sit down in a pair of boxers in the middle of my house and sit down with a pint of ice cream. I'm like, you want to talk? Let's talk. And then my lowest came out and it started telling me, well, this person sucks and this person does this and this person's bad and this doesn't work. And It's like, okay. I was like, what's really going on? And then we kept going. He's like, I don't think this is going to work. This business environment that I'm in, I'm afraid that it's going to hurt us and it's going to hurt our income. And this isn't something that works. I'm like, okay, keep going. They're like, this business violates your truth. You don't align with it. It hurts you. And it feels like you're going to lose who you are and you're going to die and you're going to get cancer. I was like, okay, well, there's a difference between this doesn't align with me versus futuring where you're going to get cancer and your legs are going to explode and blah, blah, blah. But the lowest could give me that where the other ones didn't. The other versions of me could execute. This one had to tell me, hey, this organization you're in and how you're doing it is in violation of your truth. The other versions of me couldn't do that. If you're dating someone, to make it easier for your audience at home, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're constantly yelling about, you don't do this and you don't do that and you never put the toilet seat down, it has nothing to do with the damn toilet seat. It has, this person's not appreciating you. You don't feel valued. You don't have this person connecting with. It's never about the damn toilet seat. When you go into your lowest, it's never about the first 60 things that come out. It's trying to protect you because each one of these versions of you is trying to keep you safe. That's all it cares about. But you might not be able to see it from different versions. And that's why going into the witness and having a board meeting where you sit back and you have them all do this, because in this example, my warrior was like, we're going to fire everyone. We're going to do this. We're going to terminate everything. I was like, okay, well, let's not burn everything down. You go sit over there. That's probably not going to work. And then my other one, my default was like, okay, go in there, work, fly out there, sit with them, work with the team for the next 6 months. I'm like, okay, that will produce a very specific result. And then my idea was like, everything's great. Just walk away, build something else. I'm like, okay, we want either. Go to what's really going on. And I had to go to my lowest in order to find access to, oh, this is what's actually happening. You know what? I didn't want to do this. And a lot of my clients have done this over and over again where they're frustrated with their wives, or their kids, or their businesses and all this. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, dude, I just want to buy a boat and travel the world with my kids. I'm like, awesome. You make enough money. How do we turn this into residual income so we automate a system that made you can have the freedom you want? Because you really don't want to be on another cover of a magazine. You really don't want to win another championship. What you really want to do is live a life that you're in love with. But most people have no access to their truth, which is heartbreaking because I've seen so many people right before they die be in that situation, begging for 5 more minutes to live their truth. And it never happens.
Hey, it's Aniston Ricksteins here, and I want to ask you, have you ever wondered if there's more to your life and work than what you're doing right now? What if I told you that the universe is hiring and you were born to fill a role that will bring you true purpose and success? In my new #1 best-selling book, The Universe is Hiring, Discover the Role You Were Born to Fill, I'm going to show you exactly how to step into that role. This isn't just a book full of inspiration. It's a roadmap to help you start shifting into a more fulfilling life right now. You'll get clear on your unique purpose, learn how to align with your strengths, and take actionable steps towards the career and life that truly light you up. If you're ready to make a change and start living the life you were meant for, grab your copy today. Available anywhere you buy your books online or click the link in the show notes.
What I love so much about everything you just mentioned is the extension of the conversation that you alluded to a moment ago, where we were talking about meditation, and it's the act of observing the mind. It's the paying attention to the thoughts that are running through the mind. And this is a very intentional process. Boxer shorts, ice cream, and paying attention to the mind. Like, I am now going to think about, what am I thinking about? And then you have the thought, and, for the benefit of the audience, not judging the thought has so much value, because if you're sitting thinking about something like, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Oh, I shouldn't do that. I'm going to lose everything. Or, well, what if we don't? Or, if I put this into action, you're just allowing to now have that. And I love the example of the boardroom. You're now sitting in a boardroom with a bunch of, well, I almost said qualified. Some may not be in that instance qualified, but versions of you that, yes, that can add tremendous value. And more than anything, it just helps you get back into a state of control, where you get to make a more empowered decision with that information. You mentioned a fourth state that we can create, and we can create it with love. I would love for you to expand on that.
Absolutely. So it's the ideal state, which or ideal persona. They're not states. The ideal persona is one that you create that wasn't based off of fear. So I grew up in a really tough environment, not at home. At home, it was a broken home. There's no big deal. There's a divorce, and yay, therapy. Therapy is the gift you give yourself. But in school, it was really rough. I was very much a minority. There was an immense amount of violence. There was a movie, for those of you who are old enough, called Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer. We all wanted to go to that high school. I was like, that looks safer and better. So it was a really rough environment. And as I was going through all of this, realizing that the first 3 personas were designed to make sure that I didn't get my butt kicked, because I wasn't that big. I hadn't grown. I wasn't the toughest. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the strongest. I was like, how do I survive through this? How do I make it so that I can eat? How do I make it so I don't get have all this violence? And because where I grew up, there was a lot of hatred because of my last name. It is what it is. So the first 3 were developed out of fear and to avoid pain. I had never sat down and design one that was based off of love, because I sat in hospice, and there was a young lady, if we have enough time, it's a little bit of a long story. You're sitting in hospice, and I ran the IT division, and everyone goes into a room when you're dealing with a hospice patient, and they put a mask on. They kind of go, okay, here's Aunt Susie, and we know she's terminal, so I'm put my mask on. Hey, Aunt Susie, how are you? Da, da, da. And then as soon as they walk out of the room, they take the mask off. They're like, What they don't realize is the patient or their family member is doing the same thing. As soon as a family member comes in, they put a mask on, which is all these personas are. They're just masks. And you go through that. And what normally happens is people walk in, they take the deep breath that, we talk about it before as priming. They take a deep breath, they go in as a version of themselves, and then they leave. As soon as they walk out the door, it collapses. Except this one time I was working on the computers, and people were walking into the room, and it was the opposite. They were walking in depressed, and they were walking out joyful. And I was like, what the heck is happening? I was like, this never happens. So I reached over to one of the nurses. I was like, all right, what's going on with room 4? And they're like, dude, it's been happening for 2 days. And I was like, this never happens. Like, yeah, so in hospices, they don't have visiting hours. They let you go whenever you want. Like, yeah, it's been nonstop. Like, really? So I said, I got to find out, because it's me. So I walked over and knocked on the door. I said, excuse me. I said, yes. I go, my name's Charles Schwartz. I'm in charge of the IT division. Do you mind if I talk to you? She goes, yeah, but you go by Charlie, right? I'm like, yes, ma'am. And in that moment, the brilliance of it, she switched me out of personas just like that. And she knew it. So I walk over and I was like, hi. I go, how are you? She's like, yeah. I go, I have some questions. She said, I said, I've seen people come in and out. I told her the whole story. I go, what's going on? Who are you? And she goes, I said, what do you do? And she goes, well, what do I do is very different than who I am. She goes, I'm a math teacher. She goes, but I'm a grandmother. I'm a sister. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a friend. I'm all of these things. I said, okay, that makes sense. But why is this thing happening? She goes, because my whole life until I sat in this bed, I realized that I lived a lie. I lived that if I gave enough love, that I would be enough, because this is the secret of life. If I do this, I'll be enough. And if I'm enough, I'll be worthy of love, which is the biggest lie that we've been told 1,000,000 times. And if you don't believe me, think about the person in your life you love the most in the world. What does that person have to do to be worthy of your love? And the answer is nothing. Nothing. I love it's my Aunt Susie. I love Aunt Susie. It is what it is. It's like, great. What do you have to do to be worthy of love? And if your answer is an immediate to nothing, then start doing the work, because that's your answer across the board. You don't have to do a single thing to be worthy of love. You don't have to speak on stages. You don't have to be a lot of money. You don't have to be featured. You don't have to win awards. None of that's right. I am not loved more or less because I became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's irrelevant. My family still treats me the same, which God bless my family. So I sat with this woman. I said, what's going on? She goes, I believe that the more that I gave love, that I would finally be enough. And she goes, and I was wrong. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, every time I give it back as a force multiplier. I give it out at 1, I get it back at 4. So you think that everyone's leaving joyful. They're not. They're leaving in a place of love. And I get full of love. And then she told me, she goes, the world should be run by love and absolutely nothing more. And I was like, what? And I'd never heard that before. And I was like, this is hokey. It's stupid. I work with people who are special force operators. You can't run it by love and da-da. There's a time and a place for each persona. So I never went and built one that was based off of love. And I was like, well, what would that look like? And we're like, oh, well, if I did this, my dad will love me. Irrelevant. Not about them. If I did this, my girlfriend will like me more or love me more. Irrelevant. What do I do? What type of life would I live that I was in love with and that I would love myself for? That's a very different version of me. And then you've got to go through, what does that version wear? How does he show up? How does he talk? What music does he listen to? What car does he drive? And you go through all of this and then you start designing it. And you go through that process, and that's persona building. You go through and say, hey, my persona, which now will have access to my truth, is it doesn't really live in Chicago, or it doesn't live in wherever it is. It doesn't drive this type of car. It doesn't wear this type of shirt. It doesn't do these. And you start ripping it away, because they asked a learned man, they said, how do you find happiness? He's like, stop doing all the things that make you unhappy. That's it. That's how you find happiness. Stop doing the things that make you happy. I was like, son of a bitch. All of us are going after, I want love. Stop doing all the things that you don't love. It's not complicated. But if you're interacting your life from the lowest persona, it doesn't know how to do that. It's just going to stream. The world's going to end and you're going to get cancer and your head's going to explode. That's your lowest. The warrior's like, I'm going to kill everyone. And I love my warrior as much as I love my lowest. When I go to the gym, I will invoke my warrior because I'm like, it's go time. Don't talk to me when I'm at the gym. I am not a friendly person. I am picking things up and putting it down over and over and over again, because that's what's effective then and there. My default, which is what I grew up with, there's a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place for my ideal, but you have to be able to use them at different times. It's kind of like going to a job interview. There's a version of you that's a job interview version and the version of you that has naughty naked time. If you switch up those versions, either that's going to be a really interesting job interview or really boring ass naked time. The same thing. It all comes down to access, which version of your persona you can get on command. So I know it was a long answer, but hopefully I filled in some blanks.
You know, my email signature for corporate clients, and I'm adding that in because I work a lot with companies, is with love, Rudi Rixtein's. And I do that, and I always get that like weird, you know, like reaction from people when they get the email. Obviously, I'm not sitting next to them when they open the email, but afterwards we have these conversations, and my clients will inevitably at some point will say, oh, I'll never forget the first time I saw your, you know, your proposal or your whatever. And it said, with love, Rudi, like, you know, this is very corporate, very structured. And I do it because I want to remind people that we are love. We come from love, and that love is flowing to us and through us. And the only time we don't have love is when we are not allowing the love to flow. And your answer was just jam-packed with that. And what a beautiful, beautiful story, and what a beautiful share. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you about your time in hospice, and we'll get to that a little later in the show, because I think there's so much value in that experience and how it's added to the robust version of who you are today. But I want to go back to the very beginning of our conversation today. You know, you decided to write a book, and you did it in a number of days, and then it went to bestseller in a number of days, and then you launched a podcast. Like, you've done all these things, but you've done them in a really short, condensed amount of time, which tells the audience automatically, right, Charles, he knows how to get things done. He knows how to take action. He knows how to put one foot in front of the other, and he can obviously do it at a high level because he's achieving the results that come from that. But how often do you come up against resistance in that process? You know, because I would imagine many people think, well, you know, sure, Charles can do that because Charles is Charles. Right. But that's not always the case.
So there's two answers to that. There's resistance I personally come into, and then resistance from clients and people I work with. So whenever I run into resistance for myself, I always think of the simple truth of I'm just in the way. I just got to fire myself. My clients hire me to fire them. I am not the only person in the world that could do this. And my favorite example of this is Steve Jobs, who was absolutely brilliant in some parts of his life and horrific in other parts of his life. But he sat there and said, I'm not going to do the iPad mini. They're absolute trash. We're never going to do it. We're never going to sell it. When he died, they immediately released the iPad mini and it outsold the iPhone that entire quarter. They're like, no, everybody loves it. And it's still one of the things that people love more than anything else. Realizing that you aren't mission critical to the result is super important. When you go to my clients and there's type of resistance, I'm like, listen, you want to get to XYZ results. However, you're the problem. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, all right, walk me through this. Here's a black marker. We're going to have some time. And they draw it on the erase board. I'm like, walk me through from acquisition to fulfillment when it comes to whatever your business is. And they draw out the process. Give me about 15 minutes. I normally go out and I do something else. And I say, okay, you got 15 minutes. It's close enough. Like, cool. I go, now here's a red marker. Give me the black one back. They take a red marker and now circle where you're involved, where you are mission critical to this process. And the minute that marker touches their head, I normally flick them in the ear or I throw the other marker at them. And I go to them like, you made a prison. You're the problem. Get out of the way. There are people that are smarter than you. Empower them. There are people that this is their truth. This is their passion. Hire them. When I went out and I purchased a lawn care company, I hadn't mowed a lawn since I was 13. So I went out and I was like, okay, here's the area. These are people who know it. I don't want to talk about the other owners. I want to talk to the people running their operations. And I would go and I'm like, hi, how are you? We sat down. I did this very poorly, by the way. I took a bunch of them. They were making about $75K a year. I took a bunch of them to steak dinners, steak lunches, except my dumbass lined up all three of the lunches back to back. So I had tons. I was like, oh my God, there's a lot of meat. So after the second one was done, I went to the chef. I was like, listen, I got another one coming. Whatever filet you give me, cut it in half, dude, because I am dying over here because I just had so much steak. And I don't eat as much red meat as I used to, but I sat there and I figured out the guy that I wanted. And I said, okay, what you make 75 now. I'm gonna offer you a job. I'm going to offer you $100,000 a year, and I'm going to give you 50% of all profit above and beyond what I'm making in this company that I purchased. And he's like, excuse me? I was like, absolutely. Let's do it. Let's rock and roll. I go, but your first thing that you have to do is you have to hire an assistant. And he's like, well, why? I said, well, I don't want you to, burn out. I want to make sure that someone's there as we grow this, as I teach you the systems, I teach you decentralized command. As you scale this, I'm going to make sure that you have an assistant. And everyone thinks, oh, okay, you're just trying to help them out. I'm not. If I go to someone and I give them a 25 to 40% increase on their pay, plus I give them 50% above and beyond all profit that we're currently making, which means that my bills are already paid, that I give him half of it, he's going to work his tuchus off. Tuchus is Yiddish for butt. He's going to burn out. He's absolutely going to burn out because most people don't embrace systems because they don't understand that systems set you free. They're going to work and they're going to work and they're going to grind. And this is the resistance that everyone runs into until that person goes, okay, this isn't going to work. I need to use systems. I need to empower people beneath my command and meet their needs and meet their fears and where they are and meet their love needs as well. Until I do that, I'm going to take it on myself and I'm going to burn out. So the assistant's there that as soon as the first guy burns out, the assistant takes the role. And what's the first job of the assistant? Hire another assistant. So we keep going this, we can get it going. But until people realize that the reason they don't have what they want in their life is because of them, as much as it is the reason they have what's in their life is because of them. The version of you that broke it can't fix it. And when I come into these situations, I'm like, all right, I need to fire you. I need you to get out of the way. If you go away for 9 months, I guarantee you will hit your goal. But you have no idea what your goal is. You have no idea what you want. You don't have access to your truth because you don't know who you are. And then that's when personas come in. Long answer.
How do we apply that to somebody that is in there every day? They're not the leader of an organization. They don't have the financial resources to buy a boat and sail around the world with the kids, but they want to apply what you're teaching. So how would you be able to do this, I want to say like an everyday environment where somebody has to get up and go to work who doesn't necessarily have the ability to go out and hire an assistant?
So the first thing that you want to do is you need to identify who you are and what your truth is. We're talking about hospice and we'll get into that a little bit, but at hospice, you find out that death's a bartender and you go to the bartender and you sit there and you say, hey, bartender, thank you so much. I know you're closing down. Can I have 5 more minutes? That's like, nope, you're done. And being able to sit down, and if you were thinking about right now at home, finding a way to access your truth is if you were to die and you couldn't make another phone call, what are the things you would regret not saying? Who would you regret not saying these things to? Write it down. Write a letter. Call them up. If you haven't talked to them in 30 years, write a letter to them. Send them an email. Whatever you want to do, get it out. Having that peace. When my grandmother died, who is my favorite person in the world, when she died, I will miss her every moment of every day for the rest of my life. She was my best friend. But I don't regret what I didn't say because I spent time with her. There was peace to that. Most people have never done that themselves. They've never sat down and realized what is the things that they haven't said to themselves and what stuff hasn't they access to their own truth. Because people don't have access to their truth, they're believing lies of, I can't hire an assistant. I can't scale this. I can't do this because they don't know who they are. And that since they don't know who they are, they don't have access to the truth in their end. When I do this with my clients who are making more money than I can possibly ever get in my own, and we have these conversations, I'm like, well, what is your real truth? They're like, I don't know. I'm just trying to make my dad happy. I'm like, cool. Now we've reached therapy 101. Great. Let's go farther. And then you go into it and you go into it and you go into it. I'm like, what do you really want? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, listen, I retired because X minus Y equals Z. X is how much I made. Y is how much it would cost to have someone else do my job. Z is what's left over. Once I realized at the time, we'll just make up numbers. I was making $250,000. I knew that if I hired someone at $100,000, what was left was $150,000. My job's done. I don't have to do this anymore. Then I could scale. If someone's sitting down and like, hey, I can't do this. I can't pivot this out. I'm in this situation where I can't hire an assistant. You have to understand you will always yield to your standards. Whatever's happening in your life, if you look at two numbers, the numbers in your bank account and the number on your scale, that is a result of your choice. Life's a choice. You can be a victim or anything else you want to be, but our choices seal our fate. So going through and saying, hey, I want to pivot this, or I want to do this, or I want to implement this today. The first thing is figuring out who you are and who you're showing up as. Because if you're that 3-year-old who's stuck with that bowl of cereal and made a mess and like, okay, I want to implement this. How do I do this? That 3-year-old can't clean up that mess. You have to persona shift. You have to move in a different version of yourself and show up differently in every aspect of your life. And it's all these little things. Like we talked about, I get to my lowest persona with ice cream. If I want to go to my ideal for a long time, this is embarrassing, but it's true. It was a Taylor Swift song, which is completely out of it. It was Shake It Off. I was listening to a car. I was driving through Utah. I had the top down and it came on and I was just dancing. I was like the happiest guy. I was like, what? I don't even like Taylor Swift. I was like, what is happening? I listened to Guns N' Roses and Rammstein and Zeppelin and The Who, and all of a sudden there's Taylor Swift. So I would use that to say, okay, what's going on? Give me a different answer. If I'm trying to implement something from the version of me that's broken, I'm going to get broken results until I can pivot out of that and persona shift into a different version to actually get results. And if you do it on command, life gets so much easier. You interact with your spouse differently, your kids differently. You have to be able to do that because then you'll get different answers versus strategies, because strategies don't work on their own.
Oh my gosh, that is what I was looking for. I was hoping we could put a bow on the conversation in a way that everybody at every level would be able to understand the power or the potential of what they're going to gain by reading your book. And, you know, so many people come on a podcast because they want to promote a book so they can sell a book so they can get to something. And I love that this conversation is just a generous gift of giving. And it's like, here's the free book and here's the free information, and learn about a way that you can, you know, create a shift and or a change. Prior to hitting record, I had asked Charles, you know, how can I best serve you in this episode? What is it that you want to do? And he said, man, I've already fulfilled what I need to do. He's like, I just want to help the guy that's going to help the guy that's going to help the guy that's going to hold the door for the guy that's going to have the breakthrough. And so it was a beautiful example of what does that look like to generously lead. I believe that in life, every experience is adding up to the collective of who we get to become, and that we get there, we turn around and we teach it. Charles, you're teaching it. You've had a vantage point that few people have had, obviously spending 8 years in hospice. I know that that is not the qualification behind all of what it is that you've done, but I think it has so divinely qualified you to do what it is that you do. What was your greatest gift? And you've mentioned 2 already, but I want to challenge you for another one. What would you say was your absolute greatest gift in spending 8 years in hospice?
Death of ego. Without hesitation, the death of my ego. I showed up, I started working at hospice because I had to pay for college. As I mentioned, I grew up poor, couldn't afford the last life of poor. And when I got the job, I didn't know what a hospice was. They're like, hey, we need an IT guy. Can you help out? I was like, yeah, sure. They're like, we're a hospice. I was like, all right, whatever. I don't care. Because in my mind, I thought hospital, place people get sick and then they go home. That's not a hospice. Hospice is a place you go when you're terminal. You're going to die. There's, I think it's 1% or less than 1% of the people that go into hospice nationwide actually come back out and have recovery. It might be 2%, but it's really bad. So I didn't know. So for the first 6 months, I came in as this arrogant, pompous, I'm holier than thou. I was 21 years old at the time. I thought I was God's gift. I had a 92-mile-an-hour fastball. I did just, I thought it was God's gift. I spent 6 months every day when I went home from work in tears, crying. Because I remember there was this guy who was an EOD. It was before they were SEALs. They were called EODs. He was crawling across the floor because he had inoperable bone cancer. And for those of you guys who don't know what bone cancer is, your bones are tubes. And when you have bone cancer, they start collapsing and your bones become shards and they dig into your body. And he was covered in his own feces, crawling across the floor, begging for more morphine. This is a guy who did 3 tours of in Nam as EOD. So think SEALs. They're called Sea Daddies now. It's what they do. And I was like, I'm never going to be as tough and as elite as that individual is. And this is what he's going through. So I had this, just my ego got destroyed. And I remember, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th week. It was the 3rd week. I went in and we had a child that was born terminal, a little infant, and it died and it expired. And I just remember being so full of anger and so full of hate and being like, what type of God would do this? And because it challenged every part of me. And I was so hateful and I was so mad. I just would cry uncontrollably the whole weekend. I would just cry and I'd lose it. And then I'd be angry. And then I would go through it because as a guy, we would trigger up. If we're going to cry, we'll just man up and we'll just have a flood of testosterone. And then we want to just go punch walls, which thank God I was a triathlete at the time, because as a guy, you can punch water as much as you want. Water doesn't care. Keep swimming, stupid. So I just kept doing that. And all of a sudden I realized to let go because I had all these ideas that I could control things, that I was the man, and that all this stupid BS that were just masks, that were just hiding my own insecurities and my own issues, that was ripped away. And I had to sit down and really face something that no one ever got to face. And because I was rolling out something called an EMR, which is electronic medical record system, this is before it got really fancy. This is, again, I graduated high school in 95. I am old. We were developing these and I'm sitting in the rooms with the patients. And the patients didn't have to put a mask on for me because they didn't know me. They didn't care. So I'm sitting in the bed in these rooms, working on these computers, Windows 95, Windows 2000. We're doing the updates, I'm old, Windows XP. And we're doing these updates. And I'm sitting in the rooms with the patients and they want to talk. They're bored. They've been staring at a ceiling when they're going in and out of losing bowel control because they're in so much pain or having to deal with whatever's going on. They're having real conversations. And since this was in Boca Raton, Florida, this was with people who had an immense amount of money, more money than I'll ever see. And I got to hear lessons from them. It's one of the reasons I will never watch TV by myself ever again. So I don't know if we have time for that story, but Hospice ripped away and destroyed any sort of ego being the primary driver in my life. It still shows up 100%. I'm human. I'm far from perfect. I can't even see perfect from where I am. However, ask my ex-girlfriend. She will tell you. I had lots of stuff I still to work on, but as we went through this, I got to be able to face it differently. Like, okay, there's a different way to doing this. And once I lost my ego, I got to lose it in business. And I realized, hey, I'm not the most important person here. And I teach my clients all the time. I need you to stop being a CEO. I need you to become a strategic advisor. I need to fire you from your business. And I guarantee you, you'll scale. And every time I've done this, scale like a rocket ship.
Wow. I was not expecting that answer, but absolutely beautiful and so many lessons in that in and of itself. Charles, thank you. I have 1,000 more questions to ask, but we'll have to do that on another day.
Sounds good.
I would love to know, where can people find you? Obviously, we will add all of your links into the show notes, so it's easy for everybody to simply click. But if somebody wanted to learn more about you, what you do, work with you, and or grab the copy of your book, what would be the best place?
So the book's always available. So if you just go to IamCharlesSchwartz.com, it's always there. We give away copies of it. If you go to I Am Charles Schwartz for Instagram, that's it. That's the simplest way to do it. I wanted to have a shorter name, but somebody else already owned Charles Schwartz. I'm like, gosh, darn it. So just IamCharlesSchwartz.com or I Am Charles Schwartz on Instagram. Go from there. The podcast is going through a rebranding right now, so that'll change as well. But for right now, you'll always be able to find me at I Am Charles Schwartz, and then just reach out and say, hey, I want a copy of the book. Mention this, or be in the show notes. We'll give you guys a link. Reach out, either myself or my team. We'll say, hey, absolutely. Here's a copy. Enjoy. I prefer the paper version of it versus the digital version, but I've lowered the price as much as I can on Amazon. They won't make it any cheaper for me. I don't make any money on the book. So go have fun. And if you ever see me speaking at an event, I'll bring boxes of these books. I'm like, here, take it. So it's super fun.
Well, I appreciate you so much, Charles. Thank you so much for spending your time and your knowledge with us. I think that there are so many nuggets and takeaways that people will most certainly resonate with. To the audience, I'm going to ask if there was something that you really, really enjoyed in this episode today, please share it with somebody who you think might need to hear the message so that we can help the guy that's going to help the guy that's going to help the guy that's going to hold the door. I freaking love you guys. Thank you for joining us in the Empowered Life Podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.